Welcome to the Empty Cup. I'm Tsering Padron, and this podcast is a small pause in the middle of our busy lives. A moment to look more closely at our mind, at our reactions, our fears, our hopes, and also the possibility of meeting life with more clarity and kindness. And these reflections are not about having the right answers. There is no right or wrong here. They're just invitations to slow down, to question the things we assume, and perhaps be more open to the simplicity of the moment. So, wherever you are, just take a breath, hold your empty cup, and let us pour some tea for thought. There is a teaching by Jigme Tempe Nyima that I find both very simple and also quite thought-provoking. It is a text called Transforming Suffering and Happiness. And quite at the beginning, he says that when we are hurt, disappointed, frustrated, or unhappy, and we repeatedly focus only on the suffering, something begins to happen. Like, actually, the mind learns. It becomes accustomed to seeing life through that particular lens. And because habits grow stronger with repetition, eventually, even small difficulties begin to feel enormous. Little by little, almost anything can then become a reason to be unhappy. He describes this rather dramatically, as he says, all appearances arise as enemies. I think most of us know something about this. Perhaps not in such extreme terms, but we know the feeling. We wake up slightly irritated. Maybe we had a bad night, or there was too much noise, or whatever. The weather is wrong. Someone sends you an annoying message. The coffee is cold. The person in front of you is walking too slowly. Your computer doesn't cooperate, etc., etc. Somebody says something completely innocent, and somehow it lands badly. By lunchtime, the entire universe appears to have joined forces against you. Nothing very serious had happened, and yet everything feels wrong. Maybe have some tea. Maybe that will help, especially if you're English. There is something fascinating about the way the mind learns. We often think of habits as actions, like smoking or eating too much sugar or checking our phone every 3 minutes, going for a walk every morning, or doing our meditation. But we also have habits of perception and ways of looking, ways of interpreting, ways of feeling. And this may be much more powerful than the habits we actually see. If I repeatedly look for what is wrong, I become very good at finding it. If I repeatedly notice what is missing, absence becomes increasingly visible. If I constantly compare what is happening with what I think should be happening, reality becomes one long disappointment. The extraordinary thing is that after a while, the circumstances don't even have to be particularly difficult. The habit continues by itself. It's a little like walking the same path through a field. At first, there is no path. You push through the grass. Then you walk there again and again and again. Eventually, the grass is flattened. A track appears. And before long, when you enter the field, your feet simply follow it. Not because you have consciously decided that that is the best route. It has simply become the easiest one. Our minds do something similar. A thought appears. Oh, this is terrible. And we walk down that path. And then again, why does this always happen to me? Same path. People are so inconsiderate. Same path. Nothing ever works. The same path again. And after a while, we don't even notice we're choosing a direction. It feels like reality itself. And that's the tricky part. We stop saying, I am seeing things this way, and begin saying, this is how things are. There is a huge difference between those two sentences. Of course, sometimes things really are difficult. This isn't about pretending otherwise. People hurt us, our bodies become sick, relationships end, plans collapse. The world contains injustice, violence, and grief. The teaching isn't saying that suffering is imaginary. It is saying something subtler. Our experience of suffering is shaped not only by what happens, but also by what the mind repeatedly does with what happens. And that repeated movement matters enormously. Perhaps you've noticed this after a difficult period in your life. Something happens, maybe there has been conflict or illness or a long period of stress. For months, perhaps even years, you've been bracing yourself, watching for the next problem, trying to protect yourself. Then the circumstances change and the danger passes, the situation improves, and yet your body hasn't received the message. Your mind is still waiting, still scanning, still expecting disappointment, still interpreting silence as rejection, still expecting the next difficulty. You may even find yourself strangely unable to enjoy what you once desperately wished for. Nothing is wrong, but something must be wrong. Surely, give me a minute, I'll find something. Don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you that this is what is happening with you. I know it from my experience because I think we all do it. Unhappiness can become familiar, and familiar doesn't mean pleasant. It simply means known, habitual. We know how to be disappointed. We know how to worry. We know how to prepare for disaster. We may have been practicing for decades. Then one day life becomes peaceful and we don't quite know what to do with ourselves. So the mind begins producing material. Maybe this peace won't last. Maybe this person will leave. Maybe my health will deteriorate. Maybe I've forgotten something important. Maybe. We mistake vigilance for intelligence. We think that if we anticipate suffering, it will hurt less when it arrives, or we might prevent it, or something like that. But very often, all we've done is suffer twice. Once in imagination, and perhaps later in reality, or perhaps not. The mind doesn't really mind. It has had its suffering anyway. Yes, and this is why I find Jigme Trungpa Nyma's teaching so interesting. He isn't simply telling us to think positively. Think positive can become another form of denial. Everything is wonderful. Everything happens for a reason. Look on the bright side. Sometimes the bright side is, nowhere to be found. And pretending otherwise doesn't make us wiser. The question here is not so much whether we can replace every unpleasant thought with a pleasant one. It is whether we can notice the habit itself, the movement of the mind. There it goes again, looking for what's wrong, noticing what's missing, building the case, collecting evidence. Perhaps the recognition already creates a little space. We don't have to immediately believe everything the habit tells us. We can become curious. Is this actually what is happening? Or is it the whole path through the field? Sometimes the answer will be, no, this is really difficult. Then we meet the difficulty. But sometimes, well, we might be surprised. Perhaps this moment is actually all right. Not magnificent, not ecstatic, simply all right. And all right can be very difficult to notice if we've become accustomed to dissatisfaction. There is a phrase in the teaching that has always struck me. It says, if we keep doing that, happiness will never get a chance. I love that. Well, it's not because happiness has disappeared. It may be standing right beside us, but we don't allow it into the room. We're too busy interviewing suffering. Imagine someone brings you a beautiful bowl of soup. You take one spoonful and immediately say, oh, it's a little too salty. Perhaps it is. But there are also vegetables. It's warm. It smells good. Someone may have cooked it for you. You're sitting somewhere safe. Maybe there's bread. Maybe you're hungry. All of those things are also true. But if the mind has trained itself to notice only what is wrong, the salt wins. And that becomes the entire bowl of soup. We also do that with people. Someone we love has 10 qualities. 9 are wonderful, 1 irritates us. Guess which one we think about in the shower? Guess which one we discuss with our friends? Guess which one begins to define the person when we are in a bad mood? Slowly, the person disappears behind the irritation. And this is how all appearances arise as enemies. Not necessarily because everything around us has become hostile, but because the mind has become so accustomed to opposition that it finds opposition everywhere. But there's another side to this, a more happy one, because just as unhappiness can become habitual, so can appreciation. I mean, not forced gratitude, not pretending everything is lovely. Just training the mind to see more than one thing at a time. This hurts, but the sky is beautiful. Well, I'm disappointed, but someone was kind to me today. I'm tired. This tea is quite good. I miss someone, but I'm also sitting peacefully in this room. Both can be true. Perhaps maturity isn't replacing one side with the other. Perhaps it is allowing reality to just become larger. Because suffering has a narrowing effect. It says, this is everything. And practice gently replies, no, there is here, but this isn't everything. That small difference can change a great deal. Because once the mind is no longer completely occupied but by what is wrong, other things become visible. A bird, a joke, a comfortable chair, someone's kindness, 5 quiet minutes, your own breath. Nothing dramatic, but happiness often enters quietly. If we are waiting for trumpets, we will miss it. And perhaps this is why training matters. We sometimes imagine meditation as something we do to become peaceful. But in a much deeper sense, practice is about familiarization. The Tibetan word, often translated as meditation, carries precisely this sense, becoming familiar, gom. And what are we becoming familiar with? And that is the real question. Every day we are actually already practicing something. We can practice irritation or generosity or resentment or patience or fear or trust. We're practicing noticing what's missing or noticing what's here. The mind becomes good at whatever we repeatedly ask it to do. This can sound slightly alarming, I know. Yes. Oh dear. But I also find it hopeful because habits are learned. And what is learned can gradually be reshaped, can be unlearned. Not instantly, because deep paths don't disappear because we decide to stop walking them. At least they don't disappear immediately. But perhaps today we can walk through the grass somewhere else, and tomorrow again. And eventually another path begins to appear. Maybe the first step is simply to catch ourselves. Oh, wow, I'm doing it again. No criticism, no spiritual drama, just recognition. I've turned one unpleasant moment into a terrible day. I've turned one person's mistake into a judgment about their entire character. I've turned uncertainty into catastrophe. I've turned tiredness into a story about my life. Interesting. And then perhaps ask a very small question. Okay, this is true, but what else is true? Not, what positive thing can I force myself to believe? Just, what else is true? I'm worried. What else is true? I'm safe in this moment. I'm disappointed. What else is true? Someone showed me kindness. I'm lonely. What else is true? The sun is coming through the window, and the birds are singing. And sometimes that's enough to interrupt the habit, not to erase the suffering, just to stop feeding it everything. And over time, perhaps something softens. We discover that contentment doesn't always depend on arranging circumstances perfectly, because that project, we know it's hopeless. It will never be perfect. There will always be something, a noise, an ache, an unanswered message, a bill, a difficult person, a wrinkle, a cloud. If our happiness requires reality to stop irritating us, we may have a very long wait. Perhaps freedom begins somewhere else. Not in controlling what appears, but in becoming a little less predictable in the way we meet it. We don't have to turn every appearance into an enemy. We can leave a little room for surprise, for kindness, for beauty, for things to be different from the story we've been telling ourselves for a long time, perhaps. And occasionally we may discover something rather humbling. Life had already changed. The difficult circumstances have passed. The door has opened. The sun was shining. There was tea on the table. And we were still sitting in the dark, because unhappiness had become a habit. So, perhaps today let's just notice, what is my mind practicing? What path through the field are we walking again and again? And very gently ask ourselves, is there another path? Can I create a new path? No need to make everything beautiful with rainbows and butterflies. Just let us give happiness a chance. The tea might even be good. And there we go. It is the end of this tea. Our cup is now full or empty, maybe. And you know the drill. Until the next one, keep your cup empty and your heart full.